I grew up in New York City.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Denver, Colorado.
Born in Moldova.
In Israel.
Boston.
Frankfurt, Germany.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Brooklyn, New York.
The Bronx.
I remember when somebody asked me, how come that there's so many people from the East out here? I said, because that's as far west as you can go.
Coming to California was an opportunity to start over.
Always had wanted to move to California.
I wanted a Shabbat community.
I wanted to start an internet company.
Moving from the East Coast to the Bay Area was difficult.
Not originally in any way an enthusiast.
It's certainly a struggle here to participate Jewishly.
On Passover, you couldn't find a store that sold matzahs.
I hated it the first 6 months.
A little more spread out, a little more hidden sometimes.
A little bit more challenging to find it.
I struggled. I went to different shuls and services.
Once you find them, it's family all over again.
San Francisco soon felt like home.
And then I felt so free when I came to the Bay Area. There was this incredible openness.
My idea of bohemian heaven.
Hippies and peace and love.
Just a little bit of less pressure.
I was myself. I was in my element.
That's a very special kind of environment.
We're on a kind of frontier here.
We loved the interest in innovation.
Community of people who are seeking out the
There are
future.
people looking for something new.
No one's looking down on anybody, and no one's tisk-tisking.
That has transformed my life.
California was incredibly good to my family.
We have this homegrown family now.
It is where I belong.
Here, who wants to fight? We're living in paradise.
My name is Lili Sorota. I'm 32. I live in San Francisco. I spent more than half of my life in San Francisco, but I was born in Moldova. My family immigrated to the United States when I was 12.
My name is Ryan Lamberg, and I live currently in San Francisco, California. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland.
So I went to the same school from first grade till we immigrated. In my class, there were, I don't know, 20 kids maybe that I grew up with, and everyone knew who the Jewish kids were, so there was like 5 of us. My last name was Jewish, and that, that's what you were. It was in your passport.
My parents had always been connected to a shul called Beth Am, which is a beautiful old shul in downtown Baltimore.
You got a passport when you were 16. You were issued a government-issued ID, and in it was written, it was nationality Jewish.
I went to Hebrew school. I had a bar mitzvah, but it was more about my parents' social network, it seemed.
But in terms of celebrating holidays, none of it. So, and it's definitely something that I suffer from now, because living in this country and having my boys, I really want them to, to bring some of that tradition into my family, but we didn't grow up with it, and my parents didn't grow up with it.
And always had wanted to move to California. I think there was a little bit of Grateful Dead. There was a little bit of just mysticism around soul searching and Golden Gate Bridge and what is California.
So my uncle lived here for a few years before we came. They sent pictures of supermarkets, right? Because that's all of the things that we didn't have growing up in a communist country. There were pictures of a Safeway or a Lucky's with just, I actually very much remember these, the red apples that are waxed, that are displayed in a supermarket here.
I went on a couple of job interviews, and I just remember the people being especially friendly. And welcoming.
My dad was a civil engineer, my mom was a teacher, and we had a really large home. We lived in the suburbs. And then we came here to San Francisco, and my uncle had rented a 2-bedroom apartment for us.
When I told them my story, I was thinking about moving to California. It seemed like everybody I was running into had the same story of having moved out to California, searching to do something bigger and better.
So 6 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, from moving from like a 2-story, 5-bedroom house in the country with, welfare. I mean, my parents were on welfare for a number of years after we came here, and not being able to get a job right away.
I think in the Bay Area, it's interesting because almost every holiday when I first moved out here, I struggled. I went to different shuls and services.
The Jewish community was very supportive when we came here.
There's Kahila in the East Bay. There's so many, and they either seem too hippie, too reform.
One of the organizations sent me to a camp, Camp Swig, which was a Jewish camp.
There's the Mission Minyan, for example. I've gone to that, and people are davening there, and that doesn't feel like home either.
I think I had like a mini bat mitzvah there, and I have a little certificate actually at home that meant, I never had a real bat mitzvah. That was sort of as close to that as I got. That was one of the first experiences I had and beginning to understand what it meant to be Jewish.
I'm married now. I have 2 kids. My wife is not Jewish, and we are figuring out what exactly Judaism or Christianity or ritual means in our life.
I was married at Temple Emmanuel. My husband and I really wanted a Jewish wedding. That was never even a question. It wasn't even anything we ever wanted to discuss. We knew we were going to get married in a temple under a chuppah, and have a rabbi there. And so, but aside from that, we don't regularly go to temple now.
The center of my Jewish life is generally the Passover meal that I host anywhere from 10 to 20 people each year in our house. And I've pulled together from many different sources, our own Haggadah.
Last year, when my son was 3, was the first time he came home from school and started asking about Christmas. And that's, again, even though we don't go to temple and we also don't celebrate Christmas. It was sort of like, well, we really have to get our act together. We're not going to celebrate Christmas, but then we have to do Hanukkah and we have to sort of figure it out. And it's, some of it was like searching on the internet and figuring out which side do you light the candles from and how exactly do you do this.
But what else am I going to do besides a few of the very rudimentary elements of Judaism, and how do I share that with my kids? It can't just be shared twice a year.
Growing up in Moldova, we were Jewish. We didn't really know what it meant to be Jewish, but as a kid, you knew we're different and you don't want to be different. And then when I immigrated to the US, I became Russian, which was so strange because, that's exactly what I wasn't growing up in Moldova. But I became Russian. Jewish no longer meant anything. And, all I wanted to be at that point was American.
It's hard in the Bay Area because it's so expensive to live. It's so hard to make all ends meet if you've been away from your kids working all week. All you want to do is just get a little bit of downtime, one-on-one with your kids. And that, to me, is much more important than Judaism.
The first time I truly felt American is after college when I went to travel in Europe. And you find yourself in Europe and, we're so American.
But I don't want to lose picture the sense that there's other things beyond the present moment that I want to teach my kids. And I think that's new for me.
It's kind of interesting to reflect back on that. And it's sort of, you always have to leave the place to be associated with it.
My wife is open to anything that I bring to the table, and it's up to me to bring that to the table. I do need to be deliberate about it. I just haven't figured out my path.